English teachers of Reddit, what sort of strange or awkward personal details have students revealed to you through essays? I had a student reveal their race preferences in an essay, and no, it wasn't about what types of people you prefer romantically or anything. It was pure, blatant racism. The weirdest part is that it was very well written, and based strictly on my grading criteria rubric. It was an A. It must have killed you to give them that good of a grade. I had an English teacher tell me that she used to do journals with her students that they could share to class. She explained that she stopped doing it because a student had written a long entry about torturing and killing animals, and happily shared it to the class casually. Yup, she's done with personal journals now. I never got to ask if he ever got counseling. My first semester teaching Comp 1301, I had a student write a very personal narrative, in graphic detail, about getting his testicles punctured and nearly ripped completely off by a BMX bicycle seat in a horrific after-school accident. It was hard to look at him without wincing after reading that, and it was the first paper of the semester. Oh frick, I can feel that now. Obligatory, not a teacher, but I had to very kindly explain to a high school friend that she probably should rethink her college application essay about how discovering graphic yaoi awakened her sexuality. I don't know, sometimes it pays to go with your gut. My guidance counselor type person wanted me to rewrite my essay, which was something about an anime I was obsessed with at the time. I didn't. Combination of laziness and insecurity, and ended up getting accepted to study law at Oxbridge on it. Cool story, bro. College student, not teacher. We were given an assignment to write a critical film review. One of my friends is the class clown, so I knew he was up to something when he innocently asked if we are allowed to write about any film as long as it is critical. Professor agreed, not seeing anything wrong with that. The assignment was due a week after it was given and my friend became secretive about his film review. We were honestly scared because said professor is well known for not having a sense of humor among students. Deadline came by and everyone passed their papers by surname. We were allowed to use the remaining time in our period to study 4 other subjects as she grades our papers. About an hour reading and grading, she suddenly calls my friend to stand in front of the class and hands him his paper to read out loud. My friend wrote a film review, all right, a film review about his favorite P film. He wrote about hating the plot and wishing he was the writer-director so he could fix that minor detail. Said more about the casting, his man crush on one of the male actors, music choice and costume choice. The entire class was laughing already and so was the professor when he came to the end. He didn't get in trouble because he's a really good writer, and since professor unknowingly agreed to let us review any film, he got a decent grade out of it. I asked the professor later why she made him read it in front. She admitted that his essay is too good not to share and that she wanted to know if he's really serious based on his tone. Wished now that I asked for a copy of his essay in the name of the P film he reviewed as I'm writing this down. Probably Weapons of Butt Destruction 4. I had the same issues with it that he did. On the flip side, I once wrote a paper in college about living with drug dealers. I'd been living with friends when they decided to start dealing, without telling me. When I found out, I moved and was treated like a piece of crap for it. It had ruined my chance to go to an event I was supposed to write a paper on, so I asked if I could write about that instead. My professor was reluctant but decided it might be therapeutic for me, and relented. Got a pretty good grade on it, but she probably learned more than she wanted to about kids dealing acid and weed, and wanting to do more than she ever wanted to. Not an English teacher but a history teacher. Seniors are taught current events and last week I was teaching about Trump affair with, well, all of them. How an affair can affect a president in bad way. I had one student blurt out, he can call Emmy his daughter or his dang butler during sex. Don't care. I would do IT for that $1 million hush money, baby. So there is that. I went to school for this. Thank you for your service. I was an English student and now I'm just thinking of all the crazy crap I told my teacher in my writing. I was definitely looking for help. Same. My wife teaches 9th grade English in a small town in Maine. She's got a large population of white, black, Choctaw, and Hispanic students. They all are terrible. Anyways, one day she's reading papers about a hardship that her students had to go through, and one of her Hispanic students decided to write about the day he lost his favorite dong in the ring and how it really upset him because he didn't have another dong that was as good. This 9th grader literally wrote about his illegal rooster fights and how he lost his prized rooster. A kid I taught went into detail on how they thought 9/11 was an inside job and how he didn't trust government. It was a little terrifying. One time I wrote basically a slam essay about how much I despised my ex-girlfriend. I'm a girl, hadn't come out as bi or anything. I used a lot of inappropriate language, like the word frick, not sexual or anything. And I basically just called her out on being a crappy person because we were together for 3 years and she cheated on me. I figured she would just kinda skim over the essays and give us an effort grade because the assignment was kind of just write about something that's been on your mind and wasn't really about technicality or anything. Well, she laid all the essays out and we all had to go around the room and read everyone's essay. Obviously she pulled mine, but it was awkward explaining why my essay wasn't there. I'm not a teacher and this was technically in my world geography class, but my teacher asked us to write about one thing we would want to change in our lives. I wrote about how I would change my mom's death. It tore our family apart and made me hate middle school. My principal would yell at me for being late when my dad had to make sure my mom would be okay with me and him gone. I got scared that I would come home and find my mom laying in the floor from falling or maybe even dead. I would stay home from school to make sure nothing happened to her. This wasn't well received. How do you put into words at 13 that you're scared of losing your mother? I didn't care about school at all. Everyone knew about it and I still got yelled at for doing something halfway because my mind was somewhere else. I was mentally destroyed by it. I spilled everything. A few days later my teacher told me it was pretty hard for him to read and that him and the other teachers were for me. He has no idea how much that meant to a high schooler who wanted to die at that point in life. I was 29 when I lost my mom and it basically destroyed me. I can't imagine going through it as a kid. I still have regular nightmares about the "will it happen today" roller coaster. For my creative writing class, our professor had us all write a funny Craigslist ad for something we wanted to sell or were looking to buy. Some older woman, I'm at a community college, posted a graphic personal ad looking for a younger man to satisfy this hungry cougar. She included a link to a cougar pee site and everything. The whackers love to post weird crap on discussion boards. I'm always baffled by how they think this stuff is appropriate. I had to pass on some work to our safeguarding leaders. The task was simple: demonstrate the use of effective punctuation and sentence structure in a short story titled My Perfect Holiday. I got some pretty radical ideas from a kid who wrote about going to see his family in Pakistan. Happy ending though. It turned out he doesn't have family in Pakistan. He just thought it was funny. Sigh. Why do I find this so funny? Not a teacher. In grade 9 we had to write about our earliest memory. Little did my teacher know that my earliest memory is the morning my stepfather killed himself. I got called into counseling after that. LOL. Oh crap, I'm sorry for you. That's gotta be pretty rough. Several stand out. 1. A highly detailed description of drug use, sexual assault, and suicidal thoughts. Had to report it obviously. 2. Their feelings for me. See above. 3. The details of their realization and acceptance of their significant other's transgender identity. Not necessarily strange by itself, but this was in the middle of a lot of family drama at a very strict religious school. So it was something I had to handle very carefully so as not to betray confidence. 4. The student's belief in white supremacy. Out of the blue from a very quiet, very normal seeming, otherwise intelligent girl. Could never look at her the same way and refused to write a letter of recommendation. Yikes. Used to teach social studies in English and Korea at an after-school academy long ago. Not an essay, but I gave my students a test once based off of the last 2 weeks worth of material. One girl, a 15-year-old, had been too busy with other crap going on in her life to show up for basically the entirety of the unit. Her first day back was literally the first time I'd met her, and here she was expected to take a test based off of crap she'd never seen before. She was the first one to turn the test in. None of the answers had been filled in. Instead, She wrote about how handsome I was and how she wanted to meet me outside of school. She wrote her cell phone number with the phrase "I'm expensive." After class, I sat her down and explained that everything she wrote was basically dangerous for both of us and told her I'd give her the weekend to study the unit and take the test again. For the rest of my time at that school, every week when she came in was an exercise in how can I get the teacher's attention. She was the oldest in the class, as everyone else was 12-13. And it was made abundantly clear that she'd reached that age before any of her classmates, who were oblivious to her menace. How do I say this without sounding like a pedo? Attempted charms? I had one student who unexpectedly went into great detail about her previously unmentioned sexual assault earlier that year by another student, not in my class. The essay assignment was on code switching and contact zones, and she tied it back to the importance of not assuming social cues would translate across to people of different backgrounds, as she thought she could have done more to prevent it and predict his intentions etc etc. It was a really good essay, but it was pretty jarring to read after a dozen essays from other students on talking differently to parents than friends and becoming proficient with Dota 2 lingo and the like. It was a few years back. It had already gone through campus security and everything, so I didn't have to take any action myself. It was just unexpectedly heavy stuff. I think she really needed to get it out, is all. Then the next year a completely different student on a completely different assignment wrote about almost the exact same thing. And I think freshman dorms are really dangerous places. And, side note, that parents do their daughters, and probably sons too, no favors by treating them like children until they turn 18 and need the lessons in navigating adult situations that they were intentionally deprived of. A 7th grade boy turned in an intensely erotic gay, copied and pasted from some fanfiction website, story where the main character had my name. It's been a while, but I think the character's name was changed to my name from its original internet incarnation. I'll never forget the first line. Hot, steamy Miami. As all good stories begin. I teach English in China, at an affluent school. One time I was trying to teach about making lists and graphs. So I asked them to write down how old they were, how old their mother was, how old their father was. To my amazement, at least 3 of the kids had a father 30 years or more older than their mother. I double checked and it was correct. Another time we were talking about houses and one little girl said her house has 9 floors. Now I know her dad came to the school with 3 different Porsches, red, yellow and blue, just whichever one he felt like driving, and a Holly, but I found this hard to believe. But she insisted that it was true. Not only did she have her own bedroom, she had her own dancing room and music room. I asked the other kids and some of them said it was true. Didn't read it in an essay, but one time a student of mine, who went by the name Queen, handed me a note during a class break before she left. It was a confessional of how explosive her diarrhea was, the reason for her early exit. I think I still have that note around here somewhere. I once had a student write an essay about having to lay on top of her baby brother on the floor during a drive-by shooting at her house. She was trying to protect him and felt pieces of drywall snow down on her as bullets whizzed overhead. It was a hard thing to read, but it was no doubt a harder life to live for a kid in 8th grade. I once had a young lady write about her homestay experience. It contained "I was so happy when I tasted my host father's dong. It took me a bit to understand she had meant cooking. It was an ESL class in Japan." Not a teacher but a student. I took an English 101 class and the topic of one paper was personal heaven or personal heck. I wrote about when I was raped. The names were supposed to be blacked out so it was anonymous, but my last name was easily visible. It was very cathartic listening to other people read about it as we peer reviewed the papers out loud. I'm not a teacher, but I was in grade 12 English university level, and one of our final assignments was to write an essay about anything we wanted. The kicker was, we found out on the due date we had to read them out loud to the class. Dang. To make it worse, each student had to make a comment, so everyone reads them, one at a time. We are all at our desks, shaped in a squarish room. We can speak sitting down, nothing major. Doesn't take long. Some are cool and funny, like mine, others interesting, some boring, etc. Then we get to this one kid. Side note, in high school I was good with names and faces, knew almost everyone in my school through some degree, except this kid. He didn't make a fuss to read it out loud, he just went for it. His essay was about how he hated doctors, medicine, government. Something about his sister, mother or other family relative dying in a hospital. Something about the doctors were racist, didn't care, or some conspiracy. I really don't remember. I'm also not trying to be funny. It was a very tragic, sad, weird story that I felt bad about. It was just very extreme and hard to believe. In the moment it was sad, but awkward. He used hateful, acid-searing language that was so harsh and uncalled for. He even swore a bit, saying how I can never trust a freaking doctor again. He didn't get emotional or mad, just an assertive voice throughout. Angry. I don't know why the teacher didn't stop him or something. It was really awkward and sad. No one really gave feedback. The teacher chimed in or whatever and nulled it. I don't know, man. I never reached out. I hope he and his family are okay now. I made an appointment with my microeconomics teacher to make up an exam that counted for about 20% of my final grade and missed it by 30 minutes. I woke up still drunk and emailed him saying I was so sorry for missing the exam, sir, and then followed that up with Guxfo. He did not reply and laughed to himself when we made eye contact in class. I'm a librarian, but I'm teaching a creative writing workshop in middle school. Students were allowed to write about whatever topic they wanted, and one girl turned in an essay about how her mom was on drugs, drinking, and partying while pregnant with her, and she was immediately taken from her mom when she was born and custody was given to her grandma. Her mom then proceeded to have 2 more babies while still doing drugs, drinking, and partying, but the grandma had her hands full with one child, so the others went into foster care. The self-awareness of her situation and the complete emotionless way she described every detail was absolutely heartbreaking. I sent a copy of her story to the counselor and talked to her about her story directly. Sadly, she didn't get the help she needed when she was a baby and will be dealing with the effects of fetal alcohol syndrome for the rest of her life. Biology teacher had a 15-year-old girl asking a lot of questions about STDs. Had to have a chat with her after class about the dangers of unprotected sex and clear up a lot of misconceptions that her and her BF had, including how the pull-out method isn't foolproof. Not an English teacher but a trans girl in my school read out loud a story about how she grew up in a bad neighborhood, was bullied for being gay, and eventually lost their best friend to suicide at her father's own gun range. Really brought the whole class in shock and tears, especially for middle schoolers. Not the teacher, but I work with her. We are a public charter school and we tend to get various types of kids from different districts. This one family has 6 children and all of them are troublemakers, always doing something bad, mostly get into fights. Apparently my co-worker told me that she assigned them an essay about people they look up to, and the only son of the children wrote about his friend is someone he looks up to because he has my back while we go break into cars and get into fights. And we already spoke to parents, but obviously they don't care. We are completely sure this poor child will end up in a gang unless he changes. He is only in 4th grade. Student was texting a boy she really liked. Seemed as if she was giving away her identity to try to win him over, including physical things. I encouraged her to be absolutely careful with what she should text people, and that she didn't need to measure herself by anyone else's acceptance. She was a smart kid. I'm hopeful she learned. During a free writing exercise, I had an 8-year write about white people being racist against black people. I'm an EFL teacher. I'm an EFL teacher in Asia. He's a little Chinese kid who spends all his time in school, doing homework, studying, or playing video games. The only white people he regularly sees are the teachers in our school. WTF was going on in his home? Not a single teacher I showed it to, including the school's boss, knew what to make of it. For reference, the other kids made stories about stinky kittens or their best friends, etc. Not me, but a friend in a EFL school in Egypt had a 8-year-old boy pull it out and start masturbating. He was taken aside and asked why he done. "'Cause it's what daddy does," was the reply. Unfortunately, this is common in developing countries where an entire family will live in 1 or 2 rooms. When I was a student teacher, I had a middle schooler who wrote a personal narrative about how her mom needed her to breathe into a machine to get their car to start. She clearly didn't understand why she had to do this. It was reported to CPS, but my placement ended, so I don't know what happened. Now I teach high school and get to read about miscarriages and friends overdosing. My friend is an improv teacher and has students do monologues of personal stories inspired by a prompt as part of his class. One of his more interesting students was a porn star, and her monologues were about funny things that happened to her while filming P. It was apparently not unusual for her to start with "when I was filming a double penetration scene." This isn't strictly related to the question, but he also had a female student who liked playing men in scenes, and apparently 8 weeks of his class made her realize she actually wanted to be a man. An international student who had been working and surviving alone since age 14, and thus felt like an adult at 18, basically wrote me a love letter proposal. Age doesn't matter. Then I had to as gently as possible decline, and he was gutted. After that he made a point to avoid me. I was so surprised about this, but I checked with male friends who said it didn't surprise them. Based on their memories of that age, and with the cultural difference, even this memory is hella awkward. Worked as a TAFE for freshman comp and had to read all the essays and graded them for grammar and spelling, using the good old Harbrace. Read an essay from a student I knew pretty well talking about watching her twin die by getting hit by a car crossing the road. I never knew she had a twin, and I couldn't imagine the horror that she went through. Not an English teacher, but the student that did this. In my freshman year, and for English 15 we had to write a paper on some form of literacy we have that's been important in our life. A lot of kids wrote about something generic on how music helped get them through life. I wrote about how my mom doing drugs when I was 4-8 affected my social literacy and how it's the reason I've had so many problems interacting and making friends, and found many problems I didn't know existed with myself, like this constant clinginess that drove friends away. It was initially a joke like, hey, I'll write about it and it'll be unexpected, but once I started writing I got filled with so many emotions and ended up crying more than once. When my mom taught English in middle school, there was this one student, male, 13yo, who wrote a story as an assignment about he and my mother having sex. She had to tell him that that wasn't appropriate. Pretty sure this is about 30 years ago now. Oh man, I got one recently in a presentation. Kid mentioned he didn't know what his mom looked like. That got me in the feels, but he just said it as a matter of fact. Reading through this absolutely makes me want to know whether any of my English teachers realized some of my more personal details through my writing. I wasn't exactly subtle with all of it, and there was absolutely a half dozen or so occasions I almost presented my life story to an unsuspecting class. Frick, I'm having flashbacks. I teach ESL to mostly adults and some teens. Although essays have rarely produced anything too strange or awkward, the classroom discussions are pretty rich. Conversations have included cup sizes, cheating husbands, blatant racism, admissions of virginity, secret crushes, sexual practices, getting hit on by married students, addictions, and deep existential dread. The best story I heard didn't come from one of my classes, but from a co-worker back when I was working in Japan. One of our school's more colorful older students, a salaryman, told a story about his trip to Thailand. It started normally enough, but for some reason he thought it was a good idea to tell the class that one evening he took a prostitute back to his hotel room. Upon undressing her, he saw that the girl had a little bit more than expected. To his credit, he thanked her, paid her in full, and sent her back to the bar. I do love my job. That she used to kill her pets when she was 5 by throwing them off a high-rise balcony. She knew it was messed up. She was pretty okay by high school and was very introspective. Not through an essay, but a high school English teacher of mine told us about how a student literally came to her to ask if he should take up on an offer posed by a female student who he wasn't interested in dating but still interested in the offer. You could tell she was absolutely dumbfounded. He asked her this to this day. When I was a senior in high school, we were required to keep a personal journal in English class, graded by the teacher. I wrote in there one day that I was having second thoughts about getting married. I was only 18 and I'd been to a party recently where a good looking guitar player flirted with me, and I'd begun to think about all the things I couldn't do and could never do if I spent the rest of my life with one guy. I wrote that I knew I loved my boyfriend and that being married to him would be good, but I was afraid it would be a mistake and I'd be giving up too much to do it so young. She wrote a note in my journal saying something to the effect of, "Don't worry, everyone has second thoughts. It's normal. Just do it. It'll be fine." In hindsight, I honestly wish she'd have said something else, because after 4 decades of adult life, if any 18-year-old ever asked me for my thoughts about whether she should get married, I'd say absolutely not. Life's some life. There's plenty of time for that later, and you are not going to always be the same person you are now, and neither is he. Take some time to find out who you are first. Also, divorce is the worst thing in the world to have to go through, and it's so preventable if children wouldn't be encouraged to promise forever the first time they fall in love. This was via a journal entry. The prompt was, "What do you fear?" This student was a refugee, as were all of his peers in this class. It was L. He talked about the time he spent in the camps and how he'd hear gunshots and helicopters during the night, so he was afraid to go to the bathroom. The whole entry was chilling, but he ended the entry with, "I'm also afraid of tests, because my English is not good." If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.